when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
Alright, so this is probably one of the most iconic scenes in movie history, and today I want to take some time to break it down and figure out what makes it so memorable.
Tell me again about the hash bar.
Okay, what you want to know?
Yeah, it's just legal now, right?
Yeah, it's legal, but it ain't 100% legal. I mean, you just can't.
But first, to get a better grasp, let's add some context. The scene is part of a bigger sequence that kicks off with Vincent and Jules chatting about random stuff in their car, and the apartment scene hits hard because of these earlier moments. Because what we see at the beginning of Pulp Fiction is exactly what we wouldn't see in other crime movies, showing criminals just going about their daily lives. Normally you'd see them already busting into the apartment, as any other director would cut these scenes. Here we even follow them waiting for the elevator, tagging along their whole journey, from inside the car, through the building lobby, or the elevator,
Foot massage.
and down a long hallway in one continuous
You
shot.
don't be giving Marcellus Wallace's new bride a foot massage.
You don't think he overreacted?
And part of the fun is seeing what these hitmen do on their way to work. Like, what do they chat about?
What's her name?
Mia.
Mia. How did Marcellus and her meet?
I don't know. However people meet people.
How do they pick their weapons?
We should have shotguns for this kind of deal.
Or do they have workplace gossip just like any other job?
It was a foot massage. A foot massage is nothing. I give my mother a foot massage.
The whole idea is to make us feel like we're tagging along with them, which is why the camera is always right there with them, even stopping when they do, giving us the feeling that we're part of their routine and their conversation. It's like the walks in the Before trilogy,
I'm not answering that.
but with gangsters.
It's not. It's the same ballpark.
Ain't no f***ing ballpark neither. Now look, maybe your method of massage differs from mine.
Even though the conversations throughout the sequence are mostly random and varied, there are lines that clue us in on what's coming next. Sometimes it's direct, like when they talk about the situation,
Count me up there.
3 or 4.
Best count that guy?
and other times it's more subtle, hinting at the violence and dangers of their underworld.
Then what did Marcellus do?
Sent a couple of cats over to his place. They took him out on his patio, threw his ass over the balcony. It fell false stories.
Which, of course, foreshadows Vincent's storyline with Mia Wallace in the movie.
You see, this is a moral test of oneself, whether or not you can maintain loyalty.
Anyway, the journey continues with their foot massage discussion until we get to the apartment.
Let's get in character.
And it's a signal for both his partner and us, the audience, hinting that these guys are about to put on a performance. An idea that will become even more evident with the acting and direction in the next scene.
What's her name again?
Mia.
The sense of waiting is reinforced by this shot, where we can't see much, making us impatient, especially since the shot lasts 32 seconds. But I think the joke here is that normally, we'd be on the other side, inside the room.
Hey guys!
And the hitman or gangster would suddenly appear with a certain aura of mystery. Here, there's no mystery on this side. We're seeing the reverse shot, the hitman waiting at the door. It's like wondering how the typical situation would be, but flipped.
It's definitely not a date.
The wait is interrupted by a close-up shot that really grabs your attention because we go from these long takes inside the building that last 27 seconds, 38 seconds, 2 minutes and 40 seconds, or 32 seconds, to a super tight shot that lasts just 1 second. It's like a flash, and compared to the slow pace we've gotten used to, it's pretty jarring. Then there's another quick shot of one of the guys in the apartment that lasts a second and a half. And after that, we get close-ups of the protagonists' faces, who are now fully in character. They're no longer the friendly guys from before. And the contrast in their expressions is clear. Here, with this shot, is where any other director would probably start the scene.
Hey, kids. How you boys doing?
Right after that, there's a shot of the other guys in the apartment, and when Jules and Vincent walk in, the door closes behind them,
How you boys doing?
making it clear there's no way out for these poor souls. So now, after this long intro, we finally get to the juicy part, when we step into the scene. But before we jump into it, perhaps you're curious about how I put together this 3D scene.
No.
Just checking.
Well, to be honest, I've always wanted to perfect my 3D skills, and honestly I still have a long way to go, but one thing that has helped me a lot was giving Skillshare a try, which you probably already know since it's the largest online learning community out there. Whether you're into filmmaking, photography, video editing, or drawing, Skillshare has it all. Personally, I recently found this Blender series and I'll probably be diving into it over the next few weeks because it's not just one class but a whole in-depth series as part of Skillshare's learning paths. And if you're interested in using your free time this summer to learn some of those many things you've always wanted to,
It's your future, right?
today is your lucky day, because the first 500 people who click the link in the description will get a 30-day free trial.
This was divine intervention. You know what divine intervention is?
If you have the time, you've got nothing to lose by giving it a try.
Hey, kids.
Alright, now let's get back to the scene.
How you boys doing? Hey, keep chilling.
So the way I see it, the structure of this scene has 3 small acts, and each one kicks off with a question that hooks the viewer, building suspense. The first act, for example, starts by wondering why Jules and Vincent are there. And what I love about this scene is that the usual rule is, start late, leave early. But here, Tarantino flips that on its head.
Hey, keep chilling.
When Vincent and Jules enter the room, Jules positions himself in the center where the light hits the strongest, right in the middle of the shot, and he makes this not so subtle but unforgettable gesture, making it clear who's in charge. That's why he's positioned in the most dominant part of the frame, because the whole scene is about a display of power, which, like I said, can be shown through blocking, small gestures, or dialogue.
You know who we are?
In this case, it comes in the form of questions because Jules is constantly interrogating this guy.
You're Brett, right?
Yeah.
I thought so.
It's not just about getting information, it's a demonstration of power. And when we hear the name of the guy who will be the focus of the scene, Tarantino cuts to a close-up of Jules to emphasize the importance of the moment. And this is something he will do throughout the entire scene. Since it's so dialogue-heavy, he uses these close-ups to really stress the important bits.
You remember your business partner, Marcellus Wallace, don't you, Brett?
Another question, this time rhetorical. And with his identity revealed and knowing where the focus will be, the next shot establishes the scene's dynamics. Jules at the top, Brett at the bottom, and Marley positioned between the two of them, because we'll later learn he's the mediator between them.
Yeah, I remember.
Good.
Once Brett gets why they're there, Jules and Vincent box him in the shot, Jules in front, Vincent behind, trapping him visually.
Looks like me and Vincent caught you boys at breakfast. Sorry about that. Did you have it?
Again, more questions. This time about random stuff, but what's interesting is the subtext.
I hear they got some tasty burgers. I ain't never had one myself. How are they?
You're good.
You mind if I try one of yours?
And the message behind this question is obvious. There's no way Brett can say no, and taking his food is a total power move. But what I love about this moment is the insert shot of the burger that comes next. It's a tight close-up that creates a slight visual shock due to the cut. But more importantly, it plays an interesting game with us, the audience, because the next shot is the closest of Brett so far. And this is what I find subversive about the scene because there are several editing and directing choices that make us feel a strange empathy for Brett. And that might be because the direction puts us directly in his shoes. I mean, the close-up of the burger is from his point of view. It could even be a POV shot, and this idea is backed up by the tight close-up of him that follows, where he tracks the burger with his eyes before cutting to a shot of Jules, which again seems to be from his perspective. And it's a curious choice to put us in the shoes of the guy about to be executed, because it makes us feel sorry for him.
This is a tasty burger. Vincent, you ever had a Big Kahuna burger?
In fact, after Jules tastes the burger, we have a 10-second shot of Brett.
Want a bite? They're real tasty.
Ain't hungry.
Well, if you like burgers, give them a try sometime.
The action and dialogue are with Jules and Vincent, but the focus is on Brett because we're forced to notice his size and growing exasperation. It's the only place we can see clearly because the rest of the scene is out of focus.
You know what they call a quarter pounder with cheese in France?
What's interesting about the scene in terms of treatment and dialogue is that there's no direct humiliation towards Brett, at least not until the violence erupts. Most of the time, the discomfort comes from Jules pretending to be friendly, which is obviously a way to mock them but not enough to provoke a direct reaction. But ultimately, what he does is create a sense of uncertainty and prevents us from fully reading this guy.
Because of the metric system?
Check out the big brain on Brad.
And the same uncertainty must be going through poor Brett's mind,
You're a smart motherfucker, that's right.
who even receives compliments. And I think this is what keeps the scene constantly tense, because it would be much less memorable if Jules just walked in and was immediately violent. Here, it's more than that. He's manipulative with Brett in the same way Tarantino is with us, playing. Also, throughout the scene, Marvin's presence in the background is crucial because he serves as a thermometer for how bad the situation is. And we can see from his face how the tension progressively increases.
What's in this?
Sprite.
Sprite, good.
During the whole trivial conversation, the shots are no longer close-ups of Jules, but rather wide shots, which helps create a sense of calm before the storm.
You, flock of seagulls. You know why we're here?
This is where the second act kicks off, and the editing makes it obvious by going back to the wide shot where the scene began.
Why don't you tell my man Vincent where you got your shit hid at?
Now, what I like is how the progression of the scene makes Jules gradually more hostile. At this moment, it places him at the top of the frame and shows him revealing his weapon for the first time.
It's over there.
I don't remember asking you a...
Now the question is whether the guys actually have what Jules and Vincent are after.
I don't remember asking you a goddamn thing.
Here is the first time Jules gets directly violent in the scene. His shout is a show of dominance, and it's fantastic that he spends the whole scene asking questions, and his first violent impulse is to point out that he hasn't asked Marvin anything. It's, again, a demonstration of power.
You were saying? It's in the cupboard.
And it also makes sense that the editing focuses for the first time on the faces of the three young men present. They now realize what they suspected, that earlier friendliness was just an act Jules was putting on, and the situation is serious. For this key moment, Tarantino gives us 30 seconds of silence, which is a lot in such a dialogue-heavy scene. It's probably the longest silent moment up to that point in the movie, and he uses it to put us back in Brett's perspective with the next shot. Actually, when he looks back, we cut to a shot of Vincent, just like with the burger shot. The camera is right where Brett would be, and the cut matches his gaze perfectly. Meanwhile, Vincent finally confirms that whatever is in the briefcase is there, and this is the only solo shot we get of him in the scene to emphasize the importance of what he's seeing.
We happy?
Yeah, we happy.
Look, I'm sorry.
After they've achieved their goal, Vincent eases back into the scene with a subtle move. Now the focus shifts from the briefcase to Brett, who makes a weak attempt to solve things diplomatically. It's an attempt to put himself on the same level, even literally by standing up.
I just want you to know how...
But just as at the beginning of the scene, Jules has another display of power. At this point, Jules and Vincent already have what they wanted. So now the question is, what's going to happen to these guys? That's how the third act of the scene begins, just like the other two, with a return to the wide shot. This time, it's the longest shot in the scene, running for 33 seconds, giving us plenty of time for the uncertainty about what's coming next to sink in.
You know, we got into this thing with the best intentions, really. I never...
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
But the uncertainty doesn't last long because we get the answer by the end of that shot, followed by a sudden cut to a close-up of Jules. Here, Sally Mankey breaks the rule of editing, cause usually we'd go from a wide shot to a medium shot, and then to a close-up, not straight from wide to close. But she breaks this rule to create more impact. And the interesting thing is that the gunshot is, ironically, not very violent. Without the sound, you wouldn't even know it happened. There is no blood, no gunpowder, no flashes, and Jules's wrist barely moves. And ironically, this happens a lot in the movie. Like when Butch slices the store guys with the katana, the cut is hidden, or when he stabs them, it's off screen. I'm not saying the movie isn't violent, it definitely is, but it's interesting how Tarantino saves the graphic stuff for certain moments.
Please, continue. You were saying something about best intentions? What's the matter?
After this, the shots switched to close-ups instead of the usual medium shots to amp up the visual tension. And in Brett's close-up, Jules prowls around him like a hunter stalking his prey. He even becomes a shadow, flocking the lens and leaving the screen black for a second and a half, which reinforces our uncertainty.
What does Marcellus Wallace look like?
And again, we return to questions as a form of intimidation.
What?
What country you from?
What?
What ain't no country I ever heard?
At one point, the editing cuts to a wider shot, and this sudden cut highlights the violence of Jules' movement and creates more visual impact, and this impact is reinforced by the composition. Before, the frames were balanced with the characters properly spaced out, but now the shot is totally unbalanced with all the visual weight on the right. And after this striking moment, the editing cuts back to medium shots to ease the tension a bit and build it up again towards the climax of the scene.
They speak English and what?
What?
English, motherfucker! Do you speak it?
Yes.
Then you know what I'm saying.
But these medium shots are different from before. Earlier, Jules had a low-angle shot, while Brett's shot was straightforward. Now, Jules' shot is even more low-angled, showing more ceiling and making him look more dominant, while Brett is framed by two dark silhouettes, much more prominent than before, leaving him with no escape.
Describe what Marcellus Wallace looks like.
What?
Say what again? Say what again?
The dialogues keep going, and by now I think we all know them, so it doesn't really make sense to include them all, but the cuts get faster and faster until the second gunshot, which is blocked again by Jules' body.
He's black.
Go on.
He's bald.
Does he look like a bitch?
What?
Again, the gunshot isn't that graphic, and if the first one was a shock, this one feels almost like a joke, and here we start to see that for this young Tarantino, violence is an aesthetic choice, which becomes more obvious by the end of the scene, which we'll get to.
You read the Bible, Brett?
Yes.
Oh, there's this passage I got memorized. Sort of fits this occasion.
Jules starts his speech really close to Brett, and the Bible passage adds a mystical vibe to the scene, with the golden light in the briefcase, the 666, the Bible verse, and what by the end of the scene Jules calls a miracle.
This was divine intervention. You know what divine intervention is?
It's an interesting mix.
The path of the righteous man is beset on all sides by the inequities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men.
Actually, what Jules quotes isn't exactly what the Bible says. There are some changes. The original Bible text is shorter and less aggressive, and to be honest, we don't know if the Bible in Tarantino's universe is more violent, which would make sense, or if Jules just doesn't know the passage well and altered it, which also makes sense. But it's clear he's taking on a role of divine justice, maybe to justify his actions.
For he is truly his brother's keeper and the finder of lost children. And I will strike down upon thee.
But what's interesting to me is how Jules starts to own the space, like it's a performance and he's involving his witness, Marvin, in a very theatrical way. And it makes sense because the characters in this world are basically performers, and they're aware of it.
I never gave much thought to what it meant. I just thought it was some cold-blooded shit to say to a motherfucker before I popped a cap in his ass.
With great vengeance and furious anger, those who attempt to poison and destroy my brothers.
I mean, by the end of the movie, Jules admits he's been quoting this passage his whole life without really getting it. It was just something cool to say before killing someone, like it was written by someone else, and he has to say it when he gets into character.
Let's get into character.
And you will know my name is the Lord.
The speech adds a ceremonial feel to the scene because, like I said, for Tarantino, violence is an aesthetic tool. And in this scene, we see three common uses: as shock value, as a joke, and finally, as something mesmerizing.
When I lay my vengeance upon thee.
I mean, if you think about it, it's horrible. They're killing a poor guy. But it's shown as a ritual with Samuel L. Jackson delivering his speech. Additionally, they leave out the shot where Brett gets hit. And I think that adding these details is the only way a movie can start with the execution of some poor guy. And instead of making us feel sorry for him, actually makes us cheer because of how the scene builds and the tone is set. the action happens off screen, and what we see are Jules and Vincent shooting, with golden flares from the guns lighting up the lens, making the scene visually striking, perhaps reminding us of the golden light from the briefcase, which, according to this guy,
It's beautiful.
by the time we reach the end of the third act of this first sequence, we get Tarantino's logic.
What is this you're watching?
He's invited us to leave our morals at the door and just sit back and enjoy.
So early in the morning for explosions and war.
And I think that's why the scene works so well. Thanks to its progression, it's like a gateway to his world and his way of understanding violence in cinema.
But where I'm coming from, it's less about reveling in violence, though I don't mind that. It's more about the fact, and there are no, oh, well, you can't do that kind of boundaries. That is exactly how cinema was when I came into it.
Yeah.
And I think I went a long way to knocking some of those walls down. The fact that anything can happen to my characters or in the scenario of the story, that is the relish that I have.
And that's Tarantino's real achievement. Here, his characters aren't taking down Hitler, psychopaths, or slave owners. They're just taking down some poor guy. And in a few minutes, he's twisted our perspective so much that we're right there with them, eagerly waiting for the next victim.